Hey, I'm back. This is Chandler from Melda Production. Today I want to show you how you can add dynamics to your creations in MTurboamp. This isn't necessarily meant to sound exactly like a real tube amp, although maybe it could. It's really just showing you how you can set this up and create whatever sound you want. You can, of course, try to make this sound like some analog thing, but of course you could do something creative with it too. So let's get into it. What I have here is just like a basic clean amp sound. Sounds like this. Nothing too exciting. What we have here is, you see, I have all of the tone stack set up here. The bass, I have middle, treble, etc. And I'm using the input EQ. There's actually another way which I'll show maybe in a future video, but today I want to use the input EQ, and you'll notice it has all these nodes for the EQ. I'm going to use these, and the reason I'm using these is because these are actually part of a dynamic EQ. So if you see the little node here, you can pull this down and have it work as a dynamic EQ. So we're going to do that today. Instead of using one of these, which I'm using for the bass, middle, and treble, let's use number 7, which we aren't using. So here, and let's find a good frequency. Okay, that seems good. Now let's move the gain back up, and we want to do that dynamically. Now I can maybe try to raise the Q or lower the Q. Actually, I have it using a band shelf, which I don't want. I'm going to use the peak filter. Although if you want to use the band shelf, you can do that too. It's more or less up to you. Make it a little bit wider than normal. Like that. Now what we want to do is make this respond to our dynamics. And you see the dynamic panel, make sure that's enabled, and there's a few ways we can set this up. I like to change the RMS length to 1 just personally, but that's up to you. The attack, this will make a big difference on the sound. I'm going to have it fairly fast, like 0.5. This is going to cut it off fairly immediately, and it's almost going to more like a feel. And when I hit it too hard, it's immediately going to clamp down on it. If you set it to, let's say, like 8 milliseconds or 7 milliseconds, it'll actually put a pop on it, and it sounds like you have a compressor in front of the amp, which is cool sometimes. But I'm going to set it here right now. Let's set this at like maybe 200 something, like this. And almost everything's set up. The next thing I need to do is I need to adjust the dynamics. So I want this to actually compress it by moving the signal down. So I'm going to set these to negative. Let's try negative 15 or so. I might exaggerate a little bit for this video just because I want you to hear it. If I do it more subtly, I can feel it a bit, but it won't come through in the video well, so I'll try to exaggerate it a bit. Now everything's set up. One thing you should notice is you look at the threshold. If you look at this little arrow here, it moves it back and forth like this. If I play something now, you see here, this moves down, and it did about 4 decibels of gain reduction. And if you look here, you can see it's doing the same thing. You can see visually what it's doing. It's fairly easy. The problem with this is because the threshold is on silence, no matter how lightly I hit it, it's doing some gain reduction. We don't want that. So you can set this wherever you want. I usually try to hit my guitar. I was like, okay. I usually set it around like negative 25. And if you notice here, it's like, hey, you're not really hitting that mark even when you're strumming hard. Like that. One of the reasons is, if you look at this, you notice I'm cutting out lots of the lows, I'm cutting out the mids, etc. Even some of the highs I'm cutting. What's happening is it's showing me, or showing the detector for the dynamic EQ, all of these cuts. So that means my signal is very low in level. We can stop that by hitting input, and this will show us the signal before it goes through all these filters, like this. So now it should actually start doing some gain reduction. See there, it's doing about 3 decibels of gain reduction. Other things we can do, like I want the linked channels just because I'm not putting a stereo channel through here. But this next part, the mode, is actually very important. So this I'm using filter compensated. entire spectrum will basically let the entire signal of your guitar through, and it doesn't matter if you're hitting the low notes or the high notes or something. It just depends on the level. The filter will only listen to what filter you have. So this peak filter, which is like I said, 100 and or 1,110 hertz. So anything around there, it'll listen to. But if I play like an extremely low note, it won't be triggered at all. Now, filter compensate is the exact same thing, but if you notice, like, okay, the filter, let's say I had this filter, it's only going to catch a narrow margin, and that's going to be very low in volume. The filter compensate, it kind of boosts that, so it's not quite so low, and you don't have to push your threshold down quite so far. So that's the one I'm using. I'll see if I can demonstrate it for you. I'll show you one more thing. If you think, like, I'm not getting enough gain reduction, you can use the level gain here, and this will show you or show the dynamic processor more gain without actually turning up the gain on the amp like this. So you saw there it's doing 8 decibels of gain reduction. That's quite a lot. But let me show you here, since I'm using the filtered, if I play around this area, you see it's actually moving this down. But if I play a lower note, barely anything's happening. So this sometimes can be cool. Sometimes you want that. It's like, oh, okay, when I play higher, I want it to really clamp down and compress it. But when I'm playing low notes, I don't. Or maybe you want to do something completely different. Like if I took this and copied it, put it on 2, I'll paste it, and let's just move it down to, let's say, like 184. And I have basically the same thing. Now if I play a low note, you see how they're moving a bit differently. And that can be cool. I can, increase the release here. I can increase the attack here. So now they should be moving very differently. That can be cool sometimes. I could have this one go up or, kind of do whatever. But I hope you get the idea with that. Another thing I can do is I can also change the attack time. As I said before, if I move this up here, it should give it a bit more pop. Let me move this up just so I'm going to put a lot of gain reduction in here just so you can kind of hear it. With it off. Hopefully you can hear that there's quite a bit more pop in there. Let's see if I can even do a bit more. I'll turn the release down. Turn the release down so it's a bit faster, do a bit more. See if I can just play one note. Off. I don't know how much you could tell there, but of course you can increase it and do more, and of course pay attention to the frequencies because that will make quite a bit of difference too. So this is one way you can play with the dynamics. If you want it to go up, all you have to do is increase it like this and move it to the other side, and I don't want to do too much here, but and as you can see, if I play softly, it barely changes. But if I really dig in, you're getting that dynamic effect. Another thing I should probably talk about here is if you turn the gain up like this. See if I can turn this down. I don't want to make it too loud. I have a little bit of dirt on it. If I do the same thing, let's see if I try it like this. You can hear it fading in. I'll do it with the off one more time. On. That's probably way too much, but you get the idea. I might want to turn this down. Turn this down. So I think a little bit's good. I really over-exaggerated that, but I like that with it on because it kind of takes out some of that mid-range and it just sounds a little bit more like dynamic and alive. So experiment with that and definitely check it out with different frequencies because I have it here right in the middle, and I did this mostly because it's right in the guitar's range and the human hearing range, which I think is good, but you can move it lower or higher or wherever you want. You can play with this in a lot of different ways. And as I said, as you turn up the gain, going in, the input gain, it will actually increase the amount of gain reduction like this. See, I'm doing about 10 decibels, but if I move it down to 0 for the gain in, it's only doing about 2 or 3. Yeah, like 3 decibels. So keep that in mind. In a future video, I'll show you how to compensate for this. Sometimes you want this because this is, you know, how a real amp would work. You know, the more gain or more higher level you have going into this, the more dynamic, you know, effect you're going to have. But if you don't want that, there's a way to actually compensate for that, which I'll show you later. But hopefully this gave you some ideas to work with. Sorry I didn't, you know, choose the best sound examples, but this is more of just an idea. And hopefully in the next video I'll show you some other ways to do this and some other neat things. So if you're looking forward to that, make sure you subscribe. Give me a thumbs up if you haven't done that. Leave me any questions or comments down below and check out all the other plugins at meldaproduction.com. Till next time, see you.